Some love stories begin with a confession, others with a promise. But Chinedu's love for Amaka began with silence, and when doubt made him test that love, he learned too late. Some tests should never be given. Chinedu left Nigeria with nothing but a dream of a better life, not just for himself, but for Amaka, the woman he had loved in silence for years. He toiled under foreign skies, working endless shifts, sending money home to ensure she never lacked. He paid for her education, made sure her siblings had food on their plates, and even funded the renovation of their home. But through it all, he never confessed his love. Instead, he built a quiet hope that one day he would return, stand before her, and finally tell her the truth. But life, as always, had its own plans. A devastating accident shattered his world. The doctors said he would never walk again. His body healed, but his spirit remained broken. Returning home felt like defeat, like proving his worst fears true, that without his strength, he was nothing. Yet amidst his despair, one question gnawed at him. Did Amaka care for him, or had she only accepted his help out of convenience? Doubt is a dangerous seed, and in his loneliness, it took root. So he made a bold, perhaps foolish decision. He would test her love. He would pretend that his disability was permanent. The silence was deafening. Amaka had always known Chinedu to be a constant presence in her life. His calls, his messages, his unwavering support. And then, suddenly, nothing. At first she reasoned with herself. Maybe he's busy. Maybe he lost his phone, but as days stretched into weeks and his absence turned into a gaping void, worry tightened around her heart like a noose. She searched for answers. Friends, relatives, nobody knew, until one day a whisper reached her ears. Chinedu is back. He's in Nigeria, and he's in a wheelchair. The news hit her like a punch to the gut. Without hesitation, she rushed to his family home, but before she could reach him, her path was blocked. Her mother's fingers dug into her arm, her voice a low hiss. You will not disgrace us by tying yourself to a crippled man. Her father's tone was sharper, laced with finality. He has nothing to offer you anymore. Find someone else. Amaka's heart pounded. But he's the reason we have a roof over our heads, the reason my siblings could go to school. Her mother's face hardened, and that was his choice. Now walk away before you ruin your future. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Without another word, she pulled free and stormed into the house. Chinedu had prepared himself for this moment. He expected hesitation, pity, perhaps even quiet abandonment. But he never expected the fire in Amaka's eyes. She knelt before him, her hands trembling as they reached for his. You should have told me. He swallowed, his voice a whisper. And if I had, would you have still come? She didn't even blink. I would have run faster. His heart clenched. Days turned into weeks, and despite her family's anger, despite the judgmental whispers of the community, Amaka stayed. She nursed him with unwavering devotion, cooked for him, and defended him against mockery. And yet, as Chinedu watched her, a war raged within him. She had proven her love, but had he proven himself worthy of it? His deception hung over him like a noose, tightening with every moment she stayed, every act of kindness she showed. Guilt gnawed at him, growing heavier, unbearable. But fate, as always, had its own timing. The letter was hidden beneath his mattress, tucked away like a secret waiting to be found, and Amaka found it. She hadn't meant to pry. She had simply been tidying his room when the paper caught her eye. A folded sheet, its edges worn, as if handled too many times. Curiosity whispered. She unfolded it, and the world cracked open beneath her. The words blurred before her eyes, but the meaning was clear. A full recovery. a discharge from the hospital abroad, a man who could walk. Her hands trembled, her breath caught. He had never truly been crippled. Her heart pounded as rage and heartbreak warred within her. Had this all been a lie? A game? That night, she confronted him. "Tell me the truth, Chinedu." Her voice was eerily calm, but her eyes burned with betrayal. He met her gaze, knowing the moment had come. "I needed to know if your love was real, if you would stay even when I had nothing to give." Her jaw clenched. "And what if I had left? Would you have held this against me?" His silence was answer enough. She let out a bitter laugh, but it was laced with pain. "You broke me, Chinedu. I defied my family. I fought for you. And all this time, you were testing me?" Tears welled in her eyes. Was my love not enough? Guilt crashed over him like a tidal wave. "Amaka, please." But she was already walking away, and for the first time in his life, Chinedu felt truly powerless, not because of a fake disability, but because he had just lost the one thing that mattered most. Weeks passed, but the ache in Amaka's heart did not fade. She told herself she was done with Chinedu, that his betrayal had cut too deep, that she would never forgive him. But her heart, her stubborn, foolish heart, refused to listen. She saw him everywhere. In the morning light that streamed through her window, in the laughter of her siblings as they played outside, in the quiet moments when she closed her eyes and imagined his voice calling her name. Her parents, sensing her turmoil, wasted no time in arranging a meeting with Obinna, a wealthy businessman, respectable, eager to marry. "Obinna is a good man," her mother said, adjusting the scarf around her shoulders. "He is everything you need." "He is a man who will not test you," her father added, his voice firm. "He will cherish you." Amaka sat in silence as they spoke, her fingers clenching the edge of her wrapper. They meant well, she knew. They thought they were saving her from heartbreak. So she agreed to meet him. The dinner was pleasant enough. Obinna was charming, polite, and spoke with the confidence of a man who had never known struggle. He complimented her beauty, praised her intelligence, and even hinted at the kind of life he could offer her. One of comfort and security. But the entire time, Amaka barely heard a word he said. Her mind was elsewhere. Would Chinedu have looked at me like this if I had accepted his test? Would he have fought for me if I had left? When Obinna reached for her hand across the table, she pulled away. That night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she whispered to herself, "I am done with Chinedu." But even she knew it was a lie. Chinedu did not give up. He knew he had broken something fragile between them, something that could never be mended with mere words. But he also knew one truth. He loved Amaka, and he would spend the rest of his life proving it to her. He found ways to see her, to remind her of what they once had. At the market, where she stood haggling over a basket of tomatoes, she turned to find him standing a few feet away, watching her with quiet longing. At church, where she knelt to pray, she felt his presence 2 rows behind her, his whispered amen echoing her own. Even on days when she tried to avoid him, fate had other plans. One evening, as she walked home, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink, she found Chinedu waiting for her by the mango tree, the place where their friendship had been born, where they had once dreamed of a future together. He stood on his own 2 feet. No wheelchair, no deception, just a man stripped of his pride, laid bare before her. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said softly, "but I will never stop trying to earn it." She closed her eyes, willing herself to ignore the way her heart leaped at his words. "You hurt me, Chinedu," she whispered. "You made me doubt everything." "I know," he murmured, and I hate myself for it. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words, unresolved feelings. She should have walked away. Instead, she found herself sitting beneath the mango tree, beside the man who had broken her heart, yet somehow still owned it. And day after day, he came back, not with grand gestures, not with empty promises, but with quiet persistence, with thoughtful gestures, helping her carry heavy bags, leaving small notes of apology, watching over her from a respectful distance. He never begged, he never pushed, he simply remained. And in the spaces between her anger, her heartbreak, and her pride, love found a way to bloom again. Her parents saw it before she did, the way she softened when his name was mentioned, the way her eyes lingered when he was near, and though they tried, they could not deny what was already written in her heart. One evening, as the wind rustled through the mango leaves, Chinedu knelt before her once more. "No more tests," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "No more secrets, just you and me, forever." Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not born of pain. She reached for his hands, her fingers curling around his. "Yes, Chinedu," she whispered, 1,000 times yes. And as he slipped the ring onto her finger, they both knew this was love. Not perfect, not easy, but real. A love that had been tested, a love that had endured, a love that would never break again. The end. Thanks for listening.